Welcome to English 101, Rhetoric 1, Week 12. This is our rhetoric and writing lecture for the week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about semicolons and colons, and then sentence unity and good usage. You can find more information about semicolons and colons on pages 377 to 381 of our Harbrace Essentials book, or section 38, 32A or 32B if you have a different edition. Sometimes those sections will help you find the right page. So, a colon says to a semicolon, "Why are you crying?" And the semicolon says, "Nobody understands me." Okay, so that's sort of like a dad joke, I guess, for colons and semicolons. But colons and semicolons are words that they are, punctuation marks rather, that are often confused. So we are going to talk about those. But the semicolon, the most frequent use of it is to connect two independent clauses. And an independent clause is just a group of words, has a subject and a verb, and they can stand alone. So sounds like a complete sentence, right? So independent clause is just another way of saying a complete sentence, basically. But that's what you want to do with a semicolon, is connect these two independent ideas. So let's look at how that works, because there's lots of other ways to do that. And just a little caution with the semicolon, I'll just say that, you don't want to overuse it. It's something that I would say use it sparingly. And in fact, you really never have to use it, I don't think, but it is something you can work into your writing if you need to, because there's always a way around it. There's usually some other way to connect to independent ideas. We talked about earlier in the semester the comma and fanboy combination that can connect. So we could also put a comma here and a word like and or but or something like that. For many cooks, basil is the key ingredient. So that is an independent clause. In other words, that's a complete sentence all by itself. Subject, verb, complete thought. And then the second part, it appears in recipes worldwide. This is also an independent clause, complete sentence. So if you have both sides balanced, just like an equation, you can put a semicolon in the middle and connect those two ideas together. That works just fine. Now, if this second part had something more like appearing in recipes, so appearing in recipes worldwide is not a complete sentence, so you wouldn't use a semicolon to connect it, because if this part's not an independent clause, you want to use some other kind of punctuation. Sweet basil is used in many Mediterranean dishes. Again, just another example. Here we have an independent clause, and then after, Thai basil is used in Asian and East Asia, Indian recipes. So once again, we have an independent clause, both connected by that semicolon. All right, semicolons can also work together with transitions. So same thing, independent clause, basil is omnipresent in the cuisine of some countries. Then we have our semicolon, our transitional phrase, for example, and a comma after that. So again, the semicolon is connecting the two independent sentences or clauses, and this transitional word is set off with a comma. Same thing down here, same example if you want to pause this and take a look at it. You could also separate elements or different parts of a long sentence. For example, in this one, we're talking about mountain lions, and to survive, mountain lions need a large area. So we're talking about the area they need. That's set off, their habitat, with a semicolon. They also need things to eat, a steady supply of deer, skunks. Notice each one of these is set off with commas, so these are like, again, almost like their own sentences, but they're clauses. And then they need a way to find a mate, establish a den, raise a litter, the family part of it, or having offspring. So we have these three different elements, and they're all set off doing very different things in the sentence and set off with semicolons. All right, that was quick, but let's take a quiz. So take a moment if you can, if you want to pause your video and just see if you could put the semicolon in the right place in each one of these sentences. The game is called soccer, only in Canada and the United States. Elsewhere it's known as football. So if you paused it, we have two independent clauses. Semicolon probably could go right here where that comma is. In amateur matches, players can be substituted frequently. However, in professional matches, the number of substitutions is limited. Once again, we have a transitional word with a comma after it, but probably need a semicolon here because we're going to set that off because it's two independent clauses. So let's see. Yes, that looks right. We put the semicolon here, and we put a semicolon here after frequently, and then the comma remains after the transitional word, however. All right, let's talk about colons. Now, I said semicolons, you can probably get by without ever really using them. You can always find another way around it, but colons are a couple of places where you really do probably have to use them, so we'll talk about that. But a colon calls attention to what follows. Something's coming up, and we're going to kind of introduce that. The colon has special uses also in business correspondence, like a business letter. If you're writing a very formal letter, you might have to use a semicolon. I mean a colon rather. And scriptural meaning coming from particularly the Bible is one place where it's used a lot. And bibliographic references, you have a bibliography, you're citing your sources, then that can also be useful as well. All right, let's look at those real quick with this colon. An explanation. No one expected the game to end as it did. So we're going to introduce that we're going to tell how the game ended. After 7 extra innings, the favored team collapsed. So this colon introduces kind of an explanation, right? Marcel Proust, a famous writer from France, explained the importance of mindfulness. How did he explain it? So again, that colon is letting us know we're going to have some information following. And then it introduces a quotation. So you can actually use it sometimes, if it's done correctly, to introduce a quotation. We have the semicolon, then we have the quote. This is from Proust himself, who said, "The true journey of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having fresh eyes." So not necessarily traveling anywhere, but just waking up and noticing. So again, this colon introduces some either explanation, or in this case, introduces a quotation. This is probably the most common way I use a colon, and I think for most people, a colon can introduce a list. Note that an independent clause precedes the list. So that means we have a sentence first. The website provides statistics for 3 states. Here we have Washington State, Idaho, and Oregon. And this website provides statistics for these 3 states. So just like you could almost do like a shopping list. I've got to pick some things up from the store. You could do a colon, right? I mean, there are 3 things I'd like you to do on essay number 5. And then I could put the colon. So it kind of introduces this list that's going to follow, right? And here we have a list of the states: Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. The colon, again, can do that. And I use it a lot for that. When I'm writing assignments or different things, I'll say, there are 3 things you need to do on this essay, colon, and it's like, have a thesis statement, an introduction, support it, and a conclusion or something like that, right? You could include those. You're introducing that list, just like they introduced the list of 3 states. Another place that it can show up is between a work's title and subtitle. So sometimes you'll see a book title. This title of the book is The Sixth Extinction, and the subtitle after the colon is An Unnatural History. So it can, you see this a lot. You have a title and then there's a subtitle, and the semicolon separates them. Colon, rather. I'm sorry, I keep saying semicolon. I don't want to confuse you. A colon follows the salutation of a business letter. So you have a business letter. It's more formal. If you're writing an email to somebody and you want to be very formal, Dear Dr. Horner, colon, to date. These can be actually like in a memo. You have a memo to, and you have who it's to, and the date, and so on. So these are business kind of correspondence type things, and it's just more formal than putting a comma. It can also be used in scriptural references. So again, like in the Bible, it will say Psalms, and this separates the chapter and the verse, I think. So chapter 3, verse 5, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and that colon separates those 2. So very specific uses, but again, if you were doing any of these things in business, something with scripture, or subtitles, you kind of have to use a colon rather, whereas like I said, a semicolon you don't always have to use. All right, so let's go forward to a couple of examples here and see again if you could pause this and decide where you might put a colon in each one of these 2 sentences. I'll give you just a minute, but you're going to pause it obviously, so you're back. The process consists of 6 stages. So this process is introduced here. We're introducing 6 things: recognizing a need, finding information, evaluating options, etc. So we put a colon right here to introduce this list. The post-purchase assessment has one of 2 basic results. We're introducing our results, right? So we put a colon here. Satisfaction or dissatisfaction? Let's see if we did that right. Looks like we did. So 6 stages, and you're going to list all 6 stages. The 2 basic results, and we give an explanation. And again, that's a couple of ways that you would use a colon in a sentence, and then we had those other specific ways that you use it for business, for scripture, or for a subtitle. All right, let's talk now about something different. We'll go through this pretty quickly, try to wrap this video up in just a few minutes, but we're going to talk just briefly about sentence unity. Unity meaning everything works together, everything's on the same side, and you're not doing things in your sentences and your writing that distract or take away from the main idea that you're trying to focus on. So effective academic and professional writing is composed of sentences that are consistent, meaning they kind of work together, they're similar in structure, clear, easy to understand, and complete, have enough information. This is page 326 to 332 of the Harvard Race Essentials book. All right, so let's look at one called Choosing and Arranging Details. And that has to do, this one, choosing, details related to time, location, a cause. And for example, in this first sentence, we're missing an important detail. An astrophysicist from the Harvard Smithsonian Center has predicted a galactic storm. So I don't know what a galactic storm is, but it sounds serious. And when I read that, I'm kind of wondering when, where, what. I don't know anything about this. So we need to add a detail at least to make this a little clearer. An astrophysicist from the Harvard Smithsonian Center has predicted that, here we have our galactic storm, will occur within the next 10 years. Breathe a sigh of relief. So we're not going to 10 million years, well, it might not happen too soon, hopefully, right? So we don't have to worry about this galactic storm. And we can read on and find out what that is, but you want to have enough detail so you're choosing these details well so that your reader understands and has enough background to get what you're saying. Another one that can come up really often is what's called a mixed metaphor. And you might remember, or you might know that a metaphor is when one thing stands in for something else. Love is a rose, right? Love is not literally a rose, but metaphorically, it seems similar, right? In some ways, maybe. So metaphors that get mixed can be very confusing. When you use language that evokes images, right, which is what metaphors do, make sure the two images are meaningfully related. So you don't want to mix two different metaphors. Here's an example. As he climbed the corporate ladder, there's a metaphor, right? Corporate ladder. We don't really literally climb a ladder at work, probably unless we're working in a warehouse, but we do kind of edge our way up sometimes and get promotions and so on at work. So climbing the corporate ladder is a metaphor. He sank into a sea of debt. And so again, debt is not really liquid, water, ocean, right, that we can sink into, but it's a metaphor. Here we've mixed two metaphors and it's kind of confusing. It creates a weird image of like a guy hanging onto a ladder as it disappears into the water. It just doesn't, so we need to remove one of these. So revising this, we just choose to stick with the climbing the corporate ladder. And then that's metaphoric, it's not literal, and it evokes an image of a guy climbing a ladder, but here we just say he incurred a large debt. We don't say he sank in. So again, mixing a metaphor, putting two metaphors in one sentence that don't really work together, even in one paragraph sometimes can be kind of confusing. And so a lot of times it's better to edit one of those metaphors out like we did here, so we don't get these weird images like this of the guy climbing the ladder that's sinking into the ocean, which is just very strange. Sounds like a surrealist painting or something. Okay. So let's go to revising mixed constructions. This is another thing that can happen. A sentence that begins with one kind of grammatical structure and then shifts. So this is very common. It's easy to do. But let's look at how this might work. For example, by practicing a new language, so these on the left are not correct. That's why they're in red, and the green ones are better. By practicing a new language daily, you might just hear that sounds sort of strange. And then here, instead of having by, we just say practicing a new language daily will help you become proficient. This is what's called a gerund. It can be the subject. It's an ing form of a verb, right? Practicing a new language. But by practicing is what's called a prepositional phrase, which can never be the subject of a sentence. Just like on practicing, in practice, things that are a preposition and then the word following it. So this is a mixed construction. Grammatically just doesn't work. Although she won a scholarship, does not give her the right to skip classes. So this, although she won a scholarship, is what's called an adverbial clause. And once again, it's one of those things that just cannot function as a sentence. So we want to change this adverbial clause to what's called a noun phrase, which can be the subject. Her scholarship award does not give her the right to skip classes. Again, notice the difference. Although she won a scholarship, does not give her the right to skip classes. So this adverbial clause can't be the subject, but in this case it can. So this sentence ends up not having a subject basically because of that. This can be very confusing and kind of hard to fix. But again, if you notice something might be wrong with your sentence, you're reading it and you're like, this just doesn't sound quite right. It may be because you've used, in these two, you used a kind of a grammatical construction that cannot function as a subject of your sentence. So you want to make sure a sentence always has a subject, verb, and a complete thought. And what you might be hearing here is this feeling that there's not a subject for the sentence. And when you make these two changes, you end up doing something grammatically that can work because there's a subject in each one. All right, a little bit about good usage. And this is just some not so much grammar, but the way we use the right words at the right time. So that's very important. And what's really important about good usage, and this is on page 353 to 357 of the Hard Race Essentials book, is this makes it more likely that you build ethos. If you remember, ethos is the idea that you know me, you can trust me as a writer, as a person, and it makes your ideas more likely to be taken seriously rather than seen and brushed aside and not taken seriously. So let's look at a couple of examples, just using the appropriate word choice. Slang words, kind of informal. And so in general, in academic writing, where we might use them in a text, an email, even a memo at work, we don't normally use it in academic writing. So slang covers a wide range of words or expressions that are considered casual, not formal, maybe fashionable even, by a particular age group especially, or a certain location, part of the country, part of the city, or profession, certain groups. But these are usually out of place in academic writing. Words labeled colloquial or conversational in a dictionary are fine for casual conversations and for written dialogues and personal essays on a light topic. But in more academic writing, you should replace them with more appropriate words. For example, dumb might be better to say illogical, right? It sounds maybe too formal, but kid around could be replaced by tease. So again, these are more standard words, and these are more slang. And there's just a lot of things. I'm sure there's lots of things. The way that we speak and the way we write is often very different. And that's okay. It's just a level of formality. So the more formal, just like if you're going to a job interview, you might not use slang so much, but you might use more formal words, more formal vocabulary. So again, trying to avoid slang in academic writing is a good idea, the word choice. Another one is words that are just, used in certain regions. This is really hard to know sometimes because we live and grow up, most of us. I mean, I've moved around a lot, and so I kind of have a sense, although I've been in Illinois for almost 10 years now, but I kind of have a sense of certain things that maybe come from the South or in the Southwest, or things that seem to be East Coast or West Coast or something. But anyway, there are some different things, and if possible, you want to try to avoid what are called regionalisms. In other words, words they're almost like slang words, but they're just used in a certain part of the country. For example, red up. I've never heard that. I think that must be Southern. I'm not sure. But red up for tidy up, pop for soda, and sweeper for vacuum cleaner. Now, these are all regionalisms. They can make your writing kind of lively and distinctive, but they're kind of often considered too informal for academic and professional writing. If you're writing for a diverse audience, an effective writer will not refer to the need for bifocals as presbyopia, because that's a technical term that would only be used by like an eye doctor. So again, technical language is fine if you're in a computer class and you're using very technical, but if you're writing for a regular, just normal English class or some other class, and you're writing about computers and use a bunch of technical language, you definitely want to either explain it or try to use a more simple everyday word. So again, using regionalisms, these are things that are just used in certain parts of the country, or using really kind of specific technical language, jargon we sometimes call it, can be a problem. Can make because all you're trying to do with writing that we do is make it as clear as possible. Inclusive language is something that's also very important, and that's just basically trying to use language that doesn't offend or leave people out of the conversation. Non-sexist language is very important. If you look at anything that was written 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you're often going to see phrases like man's achievement in science and technology, which tends to sound like it's not including women, right? Man's achievements. Now, again, I think there was a time when mankind was just used, and it was sort of understood that included women, but again, it's not inclusive language, so it might be better to say achievements of people, or human achievements in science would be maybe a little better, as we say here, right? Human achievements. The university offers free tuition to wives of faculty. So same thing here. We're kind of assuming that faculty are all male at this university. The university offers free tuition to partners. That would be more inclusive because they could be wives, they could be husbands, they could be boyfriend, girlfriend. I mean, it could be a lot of different things, right? So it's a lot more inclusive language to say partner than wives. And this is hard, like in spoken English, I'm older, so I mean, it's hard sometimes to make these changes. I try to be careful about it in writing, obviously in speech. That's a whole nother topic. I'm not a speech teacher, so I won't go there. But in writing, we can try to be, more aware of if we're including or we're leaving people out based on our language, especially in terms of sexist language. Same thing with race, right? We can leave people out, or we can just use terms that are inappropriate. This can be very challenging because things change, right? Terms change, but in writing it's a little easier than in speech because we have time to think about it. We could even let somebody review our paper with this in mind. So we use an adjective before the word American often, like African American, Asian American, European American, Latin American, Mexican American, Native American. I'm sure you're familiar with all these, but again, these are just terms. And sometimes it's good, again, to ask your teacher, ask a friend to read your paper, and try to see if you're using sexist language or racist language. Because again, the whole point with this, to me anyway, as a writing teacher, is we're trying to build our ethos. In other words, we're trying to be trustworthy, believable, and not have anything get in the way of somebody reading our paper objectively and trying to take it seriously. All right, well, that is all I've got for language and grammar. So as always, if you have any questions, please send me an email or come to my office hours. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. Thanks for watching this.